Hey, and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits, guys. It has been way too long since we've done a video, and for that we apologize. We'll talk about that in a minute. Things have been very busy, but we're excited to have you guys here today as we go over really everything that's happened in free agency and with trades and just this insane offseason. Honestly, I don't know if I've ever seen so many crazy and wild and big name moves happening in an offseason ever. This looks like it's an NBA free agent period right now. Things have been crazy. So we're going to get to that. We're not going to get to every free agent move out there because there are some that fantasy-wise are a little bit irrelevant. However, we understand that you guys are crazy and you want to hear about absolutely everybody. So if we don't mention a guy, leave a comment and we will do tons of research on it. But unfortunately, if we talked about every single player, this video would get to be way too long. We already talked long enough about the guys who really matter, and so the guys who maybe not going to have a huge impact, we'll just kind of leave them on the wayside for now. But anyways, one thing we want to say is, guys, we're going to ramp up our production. We're going to do a lot more videos coming up. Things have been crazy. From you went to Seattle, and then we had to, Gabby was in the hospital and visiting other people in the hospital and funerals and just crazy, all sorts of stuff going on right now. Has been absolutely one of the busiest times that we have had for a very long time, and so we apologize for that, but now things are kind of hopefully calming down a little bit. We're going to get back on track, and we're going to really start hammering out these videos as we come up to the draft and tons of things. So you got anything to say, Rob?
Last time I want to say out there, if you competed in our contest that we had at the postseason playoff contest and you entered in the top 10, we put the names out there in the video. You know who you are. Get us your information. We want to send that order of t-shirts out. The top 10 winners want a t-shirt. Then one guy gets a sweatshirt actually with a logo's name on the back, things like that. So once again, got to get that information to us. We want to get those shirts out to you. If we don't hear from you in a couple weeks, we're going to go ahead and process what information we have. Other than that, let's get to it.
Yeah, let's get to it. All right, so first off, how could we not talk about Antonio Brown? Maybe I'm wrong for saying this, but this is the best move of this offseason. I'm very excited to see how this is going to go. Of course, he went to the Oakland Raiders, and that's pretty crazy. First of all, we got to talk about they got him for a 3rd and a 5th round pick. That's next to nothing. Most 5th round picks are out of the NFL in a season or two. I mean, that is nothing. 3rd round pick is somewhat valuable, but they got him for dirt cheap, and he has been an insane wide receiver. Now, I understand the attitude issues do concern some people, and it concerns me too. And we'll talk about the attitude issues in a minute because I don't think it's as big of a problem as some people really are making it out to be. Maybe in the long term it's a longer or a worse issue, but as far as this season and next season goes, it's not quite that bad. But let's not forget how unbelievably productive he is. In my mind, there is no arguing it. Antonio Brown is the best wide receiver in the NFL, and some of these crazy stats I found while looking this up really tend to prove that. Antonio Brown has 837 receptions in his first 9 seasons. That is the 2nd most receptions for a wide receiver in his first 9 years. And it took him 129 games to get over 11,000 receiving yards. That's the 2nd fewest games in NFL history to get to that number. Since 2011, he is ranked 1st in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. He's been insane. He is the longest streak, and it's still an active streak, for longest amount of seasons, or most seasons consecutive with over 100 receptions. That is 6 straight years, and he very well could. I'd be shocked if he didn't do it again this year. And he did it all while playing on a team with Juju Smith-Schuster. They are actually the first 2 teammates in NFL history to both finish with over 100 receptions. That is insane that they were able to do that. And Antonio Brown is one of just 5 players to finish with 100 receptions or more and 15 receiving touchdowns or more. I mean, guys, there's no arguing the numbers. He's been absolutely a monster. He's been insane. He has been so dominant. The question now for us is, how is he going to play in Oakland, and how is his attitude going to play a factor? Well, one, I absolutely love that he went to Oakland. That is a perfect situation. Not only do they need a wide receiver, so he's going to go there, he's going to be the guy, and he's going to get a lot of attention. He's got a good coach and a good quarterback. So when Derek Carr, we've known he's been a good quarterback. He's had his struggles, but when Gruden comes in, despite having less weapons that he's ever had in his entire career, goes out for a career high in completion percentage, passing yards, and yards per attempt, with, I believe, his 2nd highest quarterback rating and passer rating of his career. He had a monster season despite having no one to throw to. So once Antonio Brown comes in, that's going to be awesome. All right, so now last thing I got to say about this, guys, let's talk a little bit about the attitude, because I understand those comments are scary, and I understand those comments definitely really make people nervous. First thing I got to say is that this is something that's more dangerous over time. For one season, Antonio Brown's just going to be happy to be on a new team. He's going to be happy to be the guy, and that's going to bode really well. But you get to 2 season, 3 season, 4 season, it gets to be more of an issue. So for the next 2-3 years, I think we're fine. But any longer than that, yeah, those things start to build up. He's not the youngest of wide receivers, but he's certainly not old. And what I love is John Gruden has dealt with this before. In fact, a lot of people who are watching this video, I don't know if you guys will even remember this. I don't remember it. I have to do the research to find it out, but Keyshawn Johnson, he was a bit of an attitude problem, and he was the best wide receiver, I think, until now that John Gruden was able to work with. When he worked there coaching Tampa Bay, he won a Super Bowl with Keyshawn Johnson as his #1 wide receiver. And it's funny because Keyshawn Johnson made a point of complaining all the time and talking about how he didn't want to be there. And in fact, the minute after they won their Super Bowl, Gruden was out and Keyshawn Johnson was out, and the whole situation fell apart. He really seemed to be the glue that held that together. In fact, I found an article. I don't know how I found this because this was over a decade old, but I found an article posted way back then where Gruden came out and said, I'm going to try to understand this young wide receiver. I'm going to try to meet him where he's at, and I'm going to try to get him the ball more. That was huge. He made a point of saying, we want this guy to be able to compete as much as he can and have as much stats as he can and do as well as he can. So I think good coaching system, going to be a lot of attention, good quarterback. I think this is a perfect fit. Rob, what do you have to say about it?
Yeah, so on a very personal level, I have him in a dynasty league. So I've been watching, waiting to see where he landed. He could have landed in much worse spots than where he went. I think he's going to do just fine there in Oakland. I think it's going to work out really well for him, and I feel very good about the fact that I still have him in that dynasty league. I will say this, Pittsburgh was really a high-octane offense. They were near the top in scoring the last few years. I wouldn't be that surprised if he has a little decrease in their stats, but for me, he's still a top 10 wide receiver. That's where we're going to have him for sure. Once again, I think he'll land in a real good spot there. I like where he's going to be at. Can he repeat those numbers that he had in Pittsburgh? That's a very ideal situation. That's hard to say. I would lean towards a slight decrease, but overall, once again, still a top 10 wide receiver for me.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about slight decreases for some players, that's a big deal. When you have 15 touchdowns and consistently having 1,500 yards and 100 catches, a slight decrease is not much of a problem at all. And so that's what we have to say about Antonio Brown. But guys, hey, drop a comment down below. We want to know what you have to say. Of course, we don't have enough time to say everything that could be said about these guys. So if there's something you felt like we missed, make sure to let us know down below. But Rob, I think you have to talk about your player now.
All right, let's get to my guy. Let's talk about Odell Beckham. So regardless of what you think about the drama that he brings, the one thing that's undeniable, okay, the one fact that you can't ignore is the moment this guy took the field, he's been one of the greatest wide receivers to ever play the game. Okay, in his short career that he's been there, he's averaging 92 receiving yards per game. Over 16 games, that turns out to be 1,472 yards per game. That's a nice number there. He's got 44 touchdowns in 59 games. Those are very good numbers also. That turns out to be 12 touchdowns over 16 games. Once again, very solid. And he's got 390 catches over 59 games. That projects out to be 106 catches for every 16 games. So you look at that 16-game average and you project that out. That's 106 catches, 1,472 yards, and 12 TDs. Those are excellent numbers to say the least. The only thing he's really struggled with is staying healthy. So that's one concern. Probably the other concern for some people might be the drama that he can bring at times, right? Now he's reunited with his college teammate. You look at Jarvis Landry, they're both from LSU there. Now Jarvis has been known to ruffle a few feathers, and so I'm a little concerned about those two on the same team, how that'll work together. It'll be interesting to say the least. How about Odell's fantasy impact? Where do I see him? Where do I see his numbers going? Okay. Well, in order to understand his fantasy impact, he goes from Eli Manning to Baker Mayfield. Is that an upgrade or is that a downgrade? It's hard to know for sure, but I'll say this. Baker Mayfield crushed it his rookie season. He had a phenomenal rookie year, the best ever by a quarterback. He appears way ahead of Eli Manning in terms of his maturation process there. In fact, I would say this. I think he's got a much higher ceiling. Did you know last year, as a rookie, Baker Mayfield had a quarterback rate of 93.7. Do you know how many times Eli Manning has had that in his career? Never. So even as a rookie, his quarterback rate was better than any that Eli Manning's ever had. Now, if you look at their rookie seasons, you compare Eli Manning's versus Baker Mayfield's, it's not even close. So for me, obviously it's early. It's a little premature to go out and say Baker Mayfield's going to be a much, much better quarterback than Eli Manning. But I have to give the edge to Baker Mayfield at this point. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I absolutely agree. That is a great point.
Yeah, so I think it's a major upgrade for Odell Beckham to get Baker Mayfield throwing the ball versus Eli Manning. Now, what about complement of players around you? That matters. What about the weapons that are going to be around him? So you got tight end, and this tight end, David Njoku, is up and coming, got a lot of talent. We really saw him really begin to improve this year. And this is a guy that was brought into the league and viewed as a project. And so I think we're going to see even the best is yet to come with him there. You got Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, Duke Johnson, Kareem Hunt there, all very solid. Now, having a good supporting cast and weapons around him can be both for Odell and against Odell. And here's what that means. There's enough talent around him. Look at Jarvis Landry, for example. He's been a solid wide receiver. Since he's been in the league, Jarvis Landry's averaged 6 catches per game. Very solid, got good hands there. In the last 4 seasons, he's averaged over 1,000 receiving yards per season on average. I think play action is going to work really well with Chubb running the ball. Last year, he led the NFL in yards after contact. He was phenomenal there. You did some stuff on him, broke that down a little bit. He had a very good rookie season there. There's enough talent on this team and around him that defenses won't be able to just focus on double teaming Eli Manning. They're going to keep him honest with the weapons that they have there. Now, the downside of having good weapons around you is that's a lot of mouths to feed. And so I look at Odell Beckham. In his career, he's averaged 10.54 targets per game. I think that could drop slightly down to around 9. Okay, but not significantly enough it's going to really impact his stats. Take a look at where he's at. So for me, his move from the Giants to the Browns, for me, solidifies his floor, but it does lower his ceiling slightly because of all the weapons that are there. So I'm expecting for him a season around 85 to 90 catches, maybe 1,200, 1,300 receiving yards, and about 10 touchdowns. For me is a very safe and a reasonable total for him. And he's still going to be a top 5 wide receiver for me this season. Definitely got that talent, and he does have the potential to do much more, but I'm going to play it a little bit safe there until we see how he adjusts there. But once again, a lot of talent. This guy's going to be great. Love to hear from you guys out there that have Odell Beckham in your dynasty leagues. How do you feel about this move? Does it help him? Does it hurt him? What are your take on it?
Well, that's interesting. I love the kind of the players that they have around him. For starters, he's no, he's no rookie to being around a lot of guys with other talent. Evan Ingram is honestly a better tight end than David Njoku. And Sterling Shepard's a good wide receiver too. And Saquon Barkley is a great running back who can catch out of the backfield. Odell Beckham has been around other talented players. So I don't think that the question is, can he produce when other guys are around? In fact, I think he's in a perfect situation. Jarvis Landry is a good wide receiver too. In fact, a better wide receiver too than Sterling Shepard. But look at the style of wide receiver that he is. He is a very short wide receiver as far as he's not going deep down the field. He's not making a lot of plays. He's very much a safety blanket. He's not the big touchdown guy. He's not the monster 200-yard receiving day sort of guy. And so that's, really a perfect situation. We have a tight end that isn't overachieving but is good enough. A wide receiver that is good but not the big playmaker. And then really a little bit lacking that star running back out of the backfield. It's almost perfect where there's enough talent there to keep pressure off of him, but there's not so much talent that he is limited. So I think this is almost a perfect situation. We'll see how things go. My only concern is, whenever a new quarterback or a wide receiver and a quarterback are new together, how long is it going to take to build that chemistry? Fortunately, they have all offseason, and if I were them, I'd be out throwing balls, hanging out, playing video games, getting pizza, just whatever, getting as much time together as possible so that they have some real chemistry when the season comes.
Yeah, I think, you look at the talent around him. The one concern I do have is going from quarterbacks. I think Baker Mayfield's a better quarterback. The one thing I will say about him, now we have a short sample size for Baker Mayfield, but what I noticed near the end of the year as it got better, he wasn't a guy that was always forcing the ball into Jarvis Landry's hands. Mm-hmm. He spread the ball around quite a bit there, and I think that's the quality quarterback does. That's why he was so good down the stretch. Unlike Eli Manning, he was known an awful lot sometimes to force feed Eli Manning. Force feed Odell Beckham, which sometimes turned into some interceptions there. So I think Baker Mayfield is probably a better quarterback and a smarter quarterback, but will he force the ball in there? Will that decrease his overall targets? It's hard to say. Once again, I'm not worried. We talked about, whether it's Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham, it doesn't matter with both of those guys. You're going to be fine either way.
Absolutely. All right, I suppose I'm up for my first guy, the first non-wide receiver we're going to talk about today. All right, probably not the most exciting, but we have to talk about him. We don't have to, but here we are. We're going to talk about him. Joe Flacco gets traded, a 4th-round pick is what the Denver Broncos gave up to get this guy, and I think that's an interesting situation, and I wanted to talk about from his perspective. I don't think he's a huge fantasy value, and I don't even think that in most leagues he's going to get drafted. In fact, I think that him being the quarterback in that situation could be a little bit of a downfall, could be a little bit of a negative that could hold back some of those other weapons. In his career, he averages just 19 touchdowns a season. Now, considering I believe last year, there was 9 quarterbacks to throw 30 or more touchdowns or something like that. I don't remember exactly what the number was, but the fact of the matter is 19 touchdowns a season is in the bottom half of the NFL. The exact numbers or not, we all know that number is not good enough to be a star guy. And you know what? I think that is a bad sign they went after Flacco of all people for a few reasons. One, Flacco's not young means they're just kind of buying their time with the quarterback, kind of hitting the pause button, right? They're going to hit the pause button, get a quarterback that is good enough for now while they wait on a guy to develop, okay? And I think that's the other bad news. I don't know if I've ever seen so many reports about a non-first round pick almost feeling so certain he's going to go somewhere. It seems almost certain, even again recently finding out that they keep looking into the Denver Broncos probably going to draft quarterback Drew Lock. And it's probably what we're seeing here is Joe Flacco to buy some time, Lock to improve him to be the long-term quarterback. And you can really tell they're going to commit to that. And here's a few reasons why. First of all, they lost to Demarius Thomas. That's not good. But in games that they won, the Denver Broncos averaged just 17 points per game. They're a defensive-minded team with two good running backs. Philip Lindsay is very athletic. He's the faster, smaller guy, and Royce Freeman, bit more of a bruiser, bit more thick, solid guy. So they've got that combo. They've got their defense, and you know what? They have proven when they throw the ball a lot, it does not work. Interesting statistics here. Case Keenum last year, in 6 games, they allowed him to throw the ball 40 or more times. What do you think their record was in games he threw the ball 40 or more times?
I'm going to guess 0-6.
They went 0-6. They didn't win a single game when that happened. If you're the Indianapolis Colts and you have Andrew Luck, he can throw it 65 times and they're going to win. You can't do that with Keenum, and you can't do that with Joe Flacco. They're going to go back a little bit more to their identity. They're going to stick with that running game and that defense. And again, I think constantly the thing that I want to remind people is also the reports and the way that things are coming out. Sounds like he's really just a stopgap, a guy to buy time. He doesn't have huge fantasy value, but he is a fairly big name move, so we did want to talk about that briefly.
Yeah, as far as fantasy goes, I look at this. No doubt that Joe Flacco is an upgrade to Case Keenum. In my opinion, I think that's a good football move if you're a Denver Broncos fan. As far as fantasy goes, there's nothing attractive to me in this situation at all. I've got no desire for Joe Flacco. Maybe he turns out to be a bye-week replacement. If you have injuries, you're in a 2-quarterback league. But once again, good football move, not so great fantasy. I don't see him having any value. He's going to be outside the top 15 for me easily.
All right.
So let's talk about Golden Tate there. Now you look at some wide receivers. Some wide receivers are what we call PPR specialists. You look at Jarvis Landry, you mentioned him, Julian Edelman, and Golden Tate is one of those players who specializes in PPR leagues. From 2014 to 2017, he had over 90 catches every one of those years. In fact, he averaged 93 catches per season during that stretch. Yet he barely had over 1,000 yards receiving during that, and he only averaged 5 touchdowns per season. So this is a guy that his bread and butter is getting a lot of volume and getting catches there. This guy, if you take a look at him, he's got good hands. He's a reliable pass catcher, but he's not overly fast. And at 5'10", he's not a big red zone threat. And at the age of 31, going into the season, he's going to be 31 years old. We've seen as good as it's going to get with this guy. He's on the downside of his career. So I don't think a change of scenery is going to really change his value a whole lot there. Now, the Giants have a big hole to fill with Odell Beckham leaving. Obviously, we just talked about him. That doesn't suddenly mean, though, that Tate's going to get Odell Beckham 6.6 catches and 10.5 targets per game. This offense is clearly going to run through Saquon Barkley. That's his team. That's what you're going to do. Saquon Barkley is phenomenal. And so I think Tate's going to have some value there, but don't expect him to suddenly go in and get all those targets and all that volume that Beckham had. That's simply not going to have. One, they're going to change their approach to the game, and two, Tate is not nearly as good as Odell Beckham. Just put that right out there. When I look at this move here, for me, I think Tate, this move is going to have bigger football value, just like I said with Joe Flacco. I think he's going to be very solid, but as far as fantasy value goes, it's much lower, especially in standard leagues. I look at him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he has 80 catches, 850 yards, and maybe 4 to 5 TDs. Very similar to what he did last year. That's his ceiling. For me, he projects as a wide receiver 4 in most leagues. Obviously, that's going to fluctuate based on your league scoring and things like that. He'll be a fair play in PPR leagues as a wide receiver 3, and I'm talking about leagues that are maybe 12, I'd probably even say 14 teams or larger. So that's kind of my take on Golden Tate. I think he's going to have a decent year. I think he has some fantasy value, but not a lot there. What's your take?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this sort of guy, just simply because those PPR specialist guys, I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe it's just the hype, maybe I just love touchdowns, but that's what I prefer. I like guys who find the end zone, guys who get yards. Guys who get a lot of receptions are great. I'm not a huge PPR league fan. He does make me nervous. I'm curious to see how that's going to be and how he's going to interact with that team and the quarterback and the coaching system. There's a lot going on there, and it makes me hesitant, especially with Pat Shurmur there. Pat Shurmur is an interesting coach. He had that great season with the Vikings, Thanks turn Case Keenum and Diggs and Thielen into this awesome offense, and then he goes to the Giants last year. And he's just confused me ever since he's been there. He's one of the guys responsible, and he was a big advocate for paying Odell Beckham a lot of money. And then a year later, he's the very same guy who requested one of the guys who was pushing that trade to get rid of Odell Beckham. He seems very confusing, and I have no idea what he's doing there. Maybe he's a genius, and he's going to use Golden Tate awesomely, but it does make me a little hesitant, maybe a little bit nervous. I don't know what you think there, but I don't necessarily trust that quarterback situation, and so I think he's a guy with a high floor and a low ceiling. That's what I would say.
All right.
All right, so we got to talk about Mark Ingram, and this is an interesting situation. I think he's got a very high upside, but he's also got a very low floor. He could go all over the place, and I am not sure 100% what to expect with this guy, but it's fun to talk about. I mean, he's been very productive over the last few years. Last season, he had 7 touchdowns on 29 red zone touches, and there's no wonder he's so efficient. Basically, a quarter of his red zone touches turned into touchdowns. I mean, that makes sense for a guy who's 5'9", 215 pounds, actually fairly good in the passing game. Not amazing, but good enough, and a solid running back. He's done some really good things on his own, able to get 46 evaded tackles and a juke rating of 28.9. He's pretty good. I mean, just all around, he's a pretty good running back. He averaged 11.9, so he basically averaged 12 fantasy points per game last season. Those numbers were awesome. But I have some serious concerns. And the first concern is he was a little bit pampered when he played for the Saints. In fact, when he played for the Saints, he averaged just 6.7 guys in the box against him. Just 6.7. That's not a lot. Playing for Baltimore in that offense that you cannot be excited. They're not going to throw the ball. You don't worry deep. Passing game's not a fear, right? 6.7 guys. No, they're going to have 7 guys. They're going to have 8 guys. They're going to load the box on a running back like this. We've talked about it in prior videos, but another concern is, fact of the matter is, since he's come back from his suspension for using performance-enhancing drugs, his production dropped a little bit. Now, we don't have a huge sample size of that, but yeah, I imagine if his best season was when he was using performance-enhancing drugs, I'm not surprised his numbers are worse. And he's getting older. He's not getting any younger, though. He's not necessarily an old running back, but it does make me nervous. I think he could have a monster season here, but he could honestly also be a bust. There's a lot of other running backs in that offense that could get the job done. And then, of course, like I mentioned briefly, I don't know, probably the biggest concern has to be Lamar Jackson at quarterback. The lack of a receiving core, no star tight end, a young quarterback who only once has thrown for over 200 passing yards. I mean, there's a lot of concern simply with the opportunity that he's going to have open and available runs. But Rob, I don't want to take too much time talking about this. It does seem fairly straightforward, and a guy that is a bit of a sleeper in some aspect. You're going to have to take a shot on him and risk being burned. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think about one, you can't forget Gus Edwards and Dixon on there. I mean, they've got some good backs. It's funny you're talking about him as a running back for the Ravens. The whole time I'm thinking their best running back's Lamar Jackson. So that tells you a lot about their passing game. You're right. You can see loaded boxes, not nearly as a prolific offense. This guy undoubtedly is going to lose value there. For me, I would not trust this guy as a running back 2 or 3. I'm sorry, running back 1 or 2. In fact, probably even at running back 3. We've got a lot of hesitation, a lot of concerns there. So somebody will get too excited. They'll look at his numbers, and they'll begin to think this. Now that he's going to become the lead back, that's the assumption, but I'm not sure that's going to really be the case. Now that he doesn't have to compete with Alvin Kamara, this guy's going to have a phenomenal year. I just don't see it. I've got real concerns with this guy. Obviously, we'll see as the season gets closer. We'll do some more analytics, break it down, but right now I do have some major concerns with this guy. So
I absolutely love what you said. I think for a lot of people, the assumption is, good job. Boom, you got the starting job. Now you just got to take the ball and run with it. I don't think he has a starting job. If I'm being entirely honest, right now in my mind, Ed Dixon is probably the best running back in that roster. Kenneth Dixon, excuse me. Ed Dixon's a tight end. Well, it's the same team, so it's close enough. But you get the point. That's kind of where I'm coming from. He's very versatile. He showed himself to be the best running back at the end of the last season. And he can do some pretty good work in the passing game as well. But that's really all we have to say for Mark Ingram right now, unless you have anything else to add. We can get to the next player. I don't know who it is you're going to talk about.
Le'Veon Bell, big free agent. Everybody knew that this guy's going to get decent money. What's really funny about this is he turned down a lot of money hoping for a big contract, and he didn't get that. He really burned himself there, but maybe saved some wear and tear. Le'Veon Bell, let's look at his numbers. In his career, he's averaged 5.03 catches per game. That's better than Marshall Faulk or Larry Sanders, who, by the way, are 1 or 2 career-wise for total catches for running backs. He's still young at age 27, and you could argue that his body's got less wear and tear than most 27-year-old running backs because he sat out all of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
You look at his career averages. In his career, he's averaged 129 total yards per game. That's a phenomenal total yards average per game. That crushes averages like Marshall Faulk, LaDainian Tomlinson, Barry Sanders, Jim Brown, you name it. That number is phenomenal. This guy's a great all-purpose back. He's got good size. There's no real deficiencies in his game, and what I mean by that is a true 3-down back. He's going to get goal line carries. He's using the passing game. This guy can handle 7 to 8 catches per game or 25 to 30 carries per game. It doesn't matter. He can do it all. Now, he's got a career of 4.3 yards per carry. Now, the last season that he played, his yards per carry are 4.0, but I think there's a reason for that. He missed the entire preseason, so he's out of shape. He comes in. The first 2 games that he plays, his yards per carry were very low, okay? And he also had a yards per carry as a rookie of 3.6, but you remove that last season where he missed preseason, was out of shape, and his rookie year, in between he had 3 seasons where his yards per carry of 4.9, 4.7, and 4.9. That was very good. He's had 42 touchdowns in 62 games. That projects out to be 10.8 touchdowns over a 16-game period. So this guy finds a red zone there. Now, particularly the Jets, where he landed, right? They've utilized their backs well in the passing game. If you look at Forte, McGuire, Cannon, Powell, those guys, they've been used well in passing games. They're going to use Bell often. So I think he's going to get a lot of targets there, but they're not going to utilize him nearly as well as Pittsburgh did. Pittsburgh were phenomenal in utilizing Le'Veon Bell in the passing game. I just don't see that happening. I think they will use him effectively, just not as well. Now, currently, and clearly, he's the Jets' best weapon. Would you agree with that?
No, that's hands down.
Hands down, not even close. He's their best weapon. They're going to rely upon him greatly. I think he's going to see a major uptick in his workload. I think he'll have some more carries. He might have less targets and catches, but they're going to look to this guy quite often. Now, here's the downside. Okay, when he played with the Steelers, that offensive line was great, and Ben Roethlisberger is a better quarterback at this point than obviously Sam Darnold, who's a second-year quarterback. He had Antonio Brown there, who forced teams to be honest. He didn't see many loaded boxes. You just couldn't load the box against this guy because you had Antonio Brown over there. In fact, in 2017, Brown only saw loaded boxes 19.9% of the time. Consider this for comparison. That same year, the top 4 backs that faced the most loaded boxes, they all faced them over 50% of the time. This guy wasn't seeing a lot of loaded boxes. You simply couldn't do that. Even in 2016, he only saw loaded boxes 24% of the time. That's going to change this year versus the Jets. He's going to see a lot more people in the box, undoubtedly, especially with Sam Darnold under center. Now, the reason why I think this is going to be a little bit of a downgrade for him, the Steelers' offense was simply much better. They were more prolific. In fact, in 2018, they scored 26.8 points per game. That was 6th in the NFL. The Jets were 23rd. In 2017, Pittsburgh was 3rd in the league scoring, and the Jets 28th. Now, I think that gap will narrow a little bit this year. Pittsburgh's losing some guys. You don't lose Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and some of those guys and lose a little bit there. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a downgrade for Bell going from Pittsburgh to the Jets. I think we all know that. So for me, here's how I evaluate his fantasy value. Le'Veon Bell is still going to be a top 10 back this season, but he's not going to return to his top 5 status that he had many years before. That's my take. What's your take on it?
No, yeah, I completely agree. That is an interesting situation. In fact, the thing that my first thought was, now that they got a running back, I'm curious to see if that opens up a little bit of space for Robbie Anderson. That might be fun to watch. That is entirely separate from the Le'Veon Bell conversation, but that was honestly my first thought was running through my head right now. But you're right. This would be a curious situation to see. He's going to get a lot of carries. His production as far as efficiency is going to drop. That is inevitable. But this could be a huge step for a guy like Sam Darnold. If Sam Darnold can develop and use this extra pressure on the running game to open up and to really work on the passing game, maybe help Robbie Anderson and Chris Herndon out, maybe that passing game can develop to the point where Le'Veon Bell is not getting too much pressure. No matter how good that passing game gets, unless we are absolutely floored and stunned by the development of Sam Darnold, it will always be Bell as the #1 guy defenses are watching. But, maybe things go well and maybe they loosen up the pressure a little bit. I'm not so sure that's going to happen, but yeah, we'll see. Probably what we'll see is maybe his rushing, his carries go up, but I definitely think that his receptions, his targets are going to go down a bit, that's for sure. And so in PPR leagues, he definitely loses some value.
All right.
All right, well, now I get to talk about Tevin Coleman. This guy has really been, this feels like a deal that has happened under the table. Most people don't even know about that's happened, this signing when Tevin Coleman has now gone to the 49ers. So many big moves, all these guys we've talked about, multiple quarterbacks, from Tannehill and Foles and Flacco and also, Odell Beckham, and there's like Adam Humphries moved, and there's, Antonio Brown and LeVeon, like just insane amount of moves that this has really been a very quiet move that I think could go very well. It could also go very, very wrong, but I think that there's some high upside here in a guy that maybe his ADP stays low because of all these other moves and everything, that maybe you can kind of keep him under the radar a bit and take a chance on him. One thing that's nice to see, he's actually back with the coach, one of the coaches who helped scout him and is one of the biggest reasons that he got drafted to Atlanta. And so that's always good. No matter who we are, we have biases. And when you draft a guy, there's that sort of connection. When you pick a guy out of college and develop him for a year or so, you get that connection with him. I think that's going to be a huge boost. A lot of players go to a new team and they have to work on just getting the coaches to like them. I think he's got a bit of a head start there, and that is, of course, huge. He's got a career yards per carry of 4.4, but has actually had a career best of 4.8 yards per carry last season. And after a slow 6-week start, that number jumped up to 5.4. Not to mention, is not just a good yards per carry because of an offensive line. He had a high in yards after contact. He averaged 3.11 yards after contact. He's been a very effective running back. In fact, when Devonta Freeman is out, he has been an elite fantasy running back, a top 10 guy. His numbers have been insane. Despite being a backup and despite most of his games in his career so far being a second string back, he has 28 touchdowns in 44 games. Guys, that comes out to 11 touchdowns in a 16-game season, despite most of those 16 games in every season being on the bench, being a backup, being just a fill-in guy. So that's very impressive. Now, we also got to talk about it. He's sort of versatile. He's a pretty good guy in the passing game. It's funny, he managed 30 reception or average getting 30 catches per season, and that's very impressive considering he's on the same roster and has been for a while now with Devonta Freeman, where Freeman is a guy who's also going to go out there and get 30 or 40 or 50 catches. He's going to be a guy in the passing game, and so it's very exciting to see what he can do now that he's coming to a new team. Now, sorry, I'm talking very fast here, but we got to talk about is the other running backs there. They have Matt Breida, Jerick McKinnon, and Jeff Wilson. Funny thing is, of all those guys, Tevin Coleman is the biggest guy. Breida is 190 pounds, McKinnon's 205, and Jeff Wilson is 194. And so they are smaller than him. They are all fast running backs who can do a lot in the passing game. And so it's going to be very interesting this year to maybe see him take a step back in those 30 catches a season, that rate drop a little bit, and see he's probably going to switch a bit more to just be the ground and pound sort of guy. And I'm very curious to see how that's going to work out and be effective in an offense where they love to use those sort of running backs. And the fact of the matter is, it bodes very well for him that he's a bigger running back. So they actually did I don't know what you would call it, maybe just some in-depth research, and you actually found this and gave it to me, so thank you for that. But finding the ideal size for a running back is about 5 foot 11 inches and 220 to 225 pounds. And all of those other three running backs come shy of that and aren't big enough to really fit that bill perfectly. And so it'll be nice to see maybe he's the only guy who can really take a workload. In fact, all three of those guys have struggled with injuries, just been brutalized by injuries. Rob, what do you have to say? If you've got to say something, I can see it.
Yeah, well, first of all, I like Tevin Coleman. I don't like the situation. And the reason why is this looks like the dreaded running back by committee, that they're going to keep rotating guys in, try to keep them fresh. They love to use their guys in the passing situation there. So I think Tevin Coleman might fall, and his numbers might stay very similar to they were in Atlanta. Even though he might be the lead guy, unless they trade away Jerick McKinnon or cut him or do something like that. And then I think I heard that, what's his name, Raheem Mostert, the guy who broke his arm last year that was looking good. I heard he re-signed with them also. So you're looking at 4 or 5 guys there. I'm just really concerned about the running back by committee.
Absolutely. I think that's got to be the ultimate fear. But again, luckily, maybe that ADP can stay low and maybe you could capitalize on some injuries and things. And that's where, if you're watching this video, you are dedicated to fantasy, and that's great. And that's why we can talk about this guy, because if I were talking to somebody who wasn't in depth in fantasy, I probably wouldn't even mention McKinnon that much. He's not that important, not that valuable. What I love is we can talk about him to you guys, and I can say right now, wait and see. In 6 months, I know that you guys who are watching this video are going to be guys who are still paying attention to him in 6 months. And if something does happen to Jerick McKinnon, if something happens to Breida, and something happens where that backfield opens up a little bit, boom, he can instantly grow just huge value and be a very good fantasy option. And so I hate to say it, but let's be patient. We just got to wait and see, kind of throw the dice and let them fall where they may and let whatever happens going to happen. And then as good fantasy players, we just have to capitalize on whatever takes place this offseason.
All Damian Williams. Brought as a backup, right? He's got no value at all. Boom, before this guy was the hottest running back down the stretch there. So you just never know.
Absolutely.
You can never have enough running back depth on your bench. We preach that all the time.
All right. Well, that's been about 6 minutes on Tevin Coleman. So let's get to the next guy.
Nick Foles. Everybody knew he was going to go there, and sure enough, he went there. He's with the Jaguars now. He's a really confusing quarterback if you think about it. Back in 2013, this guy had an amazing season. 27 touchdown passes to only 2 interceptions. That was phenomenal. A quarterback rate of 119. But then after that, a major decline. He was relegated to a backup. Now, he's forced into action in 2019 at the end of the year when Carson Wentz went down with an injury. Most people, most experts, and myself, I'll be honest, I thought the Eagles season is done. They're not going anywhere in the postseason. He proved everybody wrong. This guy was unbelievable in the postseason. He led him to the Super Bowl win. During those playoff games, he had a quarterback rate of 115. He had 6 touchdown passes to only 1 interception, averaged over 300 passing yards per game in the postseason. So this year he starts as a starter. Wentz isn't quite back yet, and he struggled. He didn't play well at the beginning of the year. But at the end of the year, Wentz goes down again. And he played well enough down the stretch to get him back into the playoffs. In fact, in week 16 and 17 against the Redskins and the Texans, who, by the way, those defenses were playing well at that point, he played really well. In fact, he was great again. He had 6 touchdown passes, only 1 interception in those 2 games, and a quarterback rate of about 113. He also averaged over 300 passing yards in those 2 games there. So he goes to the Jags. If you're a Jaguars fan, you got to love this. He's a major upgrade over Blake Bortles. We said it last year. Blake was a bum. We said he wasn't good. Some didn't listen to us. He is now gone. This is a very solid football move. But as far as fantasy values go, I think you need to consider this as far as Nick Foles. The Jaguars are going to try to get back to their bread and butter, which is what? Dominant defense, okay? Running the ball, keeping the turnover ratio low. They're going to be a conservative offense. I think they're going to be a better offense next year than they were this year. It's hard not to be. Blake Bortles was so bad. This offense is going to make improvements, but they're not going to be a great offense. Take a look at their weapons. Marquise Lee, they got Shark, Keelan Cole, Westbrook, their tight end Swain. They're just not impressive. The weapons are impressive. This team is not designed to be a prolific offense. So he may have some week-to-week value come bye weeks or with injuries, or if in a 2-quarterback league. But to me, he's not even near the top 15. He's not even honestly in the top 20 for me. So he's a guy that doesn't have a lot of value. Good football move, not a great fantasy pick.
Absolutely. There's not much to say to that. No matter how talented he is, the weapons simply aren't there. And a big passing game, throwing the ball a lot, is not the identity of the Jaguars. As much as I want to get excited and hyped about a guy because it's the offseason and nothing is funner than talking about how they're going to win the Super Bowl and have this amazing year, it's just probably not going to happen. You just have to be realistic on that one. All right, so I'm really excited to talk about this. Now, we did our list. We sit down, we talk together. We put together a list of all the guys we're going to talk about. And originally, I was going to talk about Case Keenum, but then I decided Adam Humphries is way more interesting to talk about. So I'm going to talk about Adam Humphries instead. I'm excited. For starters, for some reason in my mind, I thought he was like 28 years old. Surprised to find out he's actually 25 years old. He is still very young for a wide receiver, and he's got time to develop and to continue to grow and to get better. And in fact, that's what the Tennessee Titans clearly think is going to happen. They just signed him to a 4-year, $36 million contract. Now, we just talked about this. We were in the car driving back from somewhere, and we were just talking like, wow, that is a big contract for them to put out, especially for a team that, has Corey Davis, who, I feel like he's going to be the #1 guy. They still need to find their quarterback situation out. They're really mostly predicated on their defense and their running game. It felt like a lot of money. It really did surprise us. You look at some of the numbers, it starts to make a bit more sense. Still maybe a bit of a risky signing, but it does make sense. He had career highs with 105 targets, 76 receptions, 816 yards, 5 touchdowns, and he actually had 48 first downs. That is a lot. 48 first downs on 76 catches. That means over half of the time he's moving the chains. That is production. Those are efficient catches. What I love about him is the style of wide receiver that he is. He averaged 10.6 yards per reception. That is a beautiful balance. He's not a burner, but he's not Golden Tate or Jarvis Landry. He's going to get down the field. He's going to open up that offense just a little bit. He's not a burner, and he's not going to disappear for a lot of times. But again, he can still open up that field a little bit, and I love that ability to kind of stretch defenses just a bit. He's been very effective, and it just wasn't the quarterback getting him the ball. He was very effective, 428 yards after contact, very effective with that. And he fits the slot wide receiver mold perfectly. He had a catch percentage of 33.3% when in traffic, when contested. That doesn't sound great, 33%, just a third of the time. That's very good. That considers numbers when he's getting smacked in the face and someone's ramming into his ribs and he's flying all over the place, like really contested. So that's actually okay numbers, fairly good numbers. In fact, his true catch percentage is 85%. That's really impressive for a guy who averages, and maybe this is his biggest fault, is that he averages just 1.6 yards of separation on his average targets. And so Adam Humphries, there's a lot to love about him, although you mentioned it earlier, and I have to think you're probably right. In the end, I don't think he's a wide receiver 1. I don't think he's a wide receiver 2. He's maybe a wide receiver 3, an okay wideout 3 or a wideout 4, because I have to think Corey Davis is still going to be the number 1 guy this year. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I like Humphries. I think he's got a lot of potential. I think this is going to be a great sign for him. I think he's going to be a wide receiver 3. Very quality play there. One concern I have coming down is Marcus Mariota staying healthy. Of course, you got Ryan Tannehill there and the quarterback situation, but I think it's a good play. I think he's going to be a very solid wide receiver 3.
Yeah, actually, we were just talking about that awful Marcus Mariota play. Last season, Marcus Mariota threw only 11 passing touchdowns. The year before, he threw just 13. Just awful. I would be very curious to see how that quarterback battle goes and how things happen. Maybe he gets back to the way he was. In fact, 3 years ago, Mariota had 26 passing touchdowns, and it looked like he was going to continue to develop and grow. And maybe he was held back by his targets. Maybe he was held back by his weapons and the people around him. If so, this could be the change that he needs, and they could really love on each other and have a great season. Maybe Tannehill steps in and is the solution. He's also been a guy who's efficient.
Yeah, I think he leaves an offense that's not nearly as prolific. I mean, Tampa Bay had a terrible defense, had to throw the ball all the time. But he also had you had Evans, you had Jackson, you had Godwin, and him. So you had 4 quality receivers. Now he's the number 2 guy, clearly, so I think that's going to help him. Maybe not as good of an offense, but a much better situation being what I would estimate at this point the number 2 guy in that team. So
Absolutely.
Latavius Murray used to be a Viking, now he's a Saint. What's really funny about this, when we talked about free agency and what he wanted to do, Latavius Murray made it very clear that he wanted to become a lead back somewhere. He wanted to be the main go-to guy. I just want to kind of give you a heads up, Latavius Murray, you are not that guy, okay? You're going to be second fiddle again to Kamara in this offense. So I don't know how that signing of being the main guy really worked out for him. It didn't seem too much. Now, I think a lot of people are going to look at him and are going to see Mark Ingram's stats and say, hey, that's the numbers he's going to get there. He's going to simply take that over, but he's not the same back. Now, the positive side of Latavius Murray is this. Last 3 years, he's had 26 touchdowns. That's really good. He's got a nose for the end zone. But if you look deeper, you're going to find out he's a very solid back, but he's not great, and he's not nearly as dynamic as Mark Ingram was or is. Now, if you minus his rookie season, Murray's yards per carry since have been 4.0. That's not great. It's very pedestrian. Now, if you take a look at that, compare that to Mark Ingram, who after his second season, Mark Ingram's yards per carry have been 4.73, major difference there. Yards after contact, if you look at that for Murray in his career, his yards after contact have been middle of the road. Not bad, but not good. Now, he did have his career best last year, so that was a little bump. That helped quite a bit there. And Murray's not nearly as effective in the passing game. Ingram averaged 3.01 catches per game the last 4 years, but Murray in his career has got 1.66 catches per game, so there's a difference there also. Now, someone would probably argue, well, it's the offense that you played in. He's going to be playing for New Orleans, and he'll benefit there, and undoubtedly that's going to help him a little bit there. When I look at Latavius Murray, I think he's going to be brought in this offense. I think he's going to pound the ball and be a relief Alvin Kamara. He is playing a prolific offense, which I think means he's going to get a lot of red zone carries. For him, he could easily hit 10 rushing touchdowns. That's going to give him standard appeal as what I would say is a running back 3, but in PPR leagues, for me, he's going to be running back 4. His overall numbers will be decent, but not quite where Ingram's were, barring an injury to Alvin Kamara. So that's my take.
Yeah. Well, to add to that, like this, some of the stats that I mentioned about Mark Ingram earlier, you could kind of apply to what we can sort of expect with Latavius Murray in that Mark Ingram last season had 28 red zone touches. We could probably expect that same sort of number from Latavius Murray. Now, for Mark Ingram, that equated to 7 touchdowns. Latavius Murray, I could see him doing that again. In my mind, he's a guy who has lowered PPR value. He has lowered value in leagues that value tons of yards, big plays. If you're in a league where touchdowns are king, where that's what matters, 100-yard bonuses don't exist, and carries don't get you points, or receptions don't get you points, or right? If you're in a fancier league with tons and tons of rules, he doesn't have much value. But in a league where touchdowns are all that matters, Murray has a little bit of value, and he is one of the better backups in the league. Because he doesn't carry a big name, you can use him as just a handcuff, which for a smaller running back like Alvin Kamara might be a perfect role on your fantasy roster for Latavius Murray, because that undersized Alvin Kamara does make me a little bit hesitant and nervous. But yeah, I don't think he's going to have a huge role unless something happens. All right, so now I have Kareem Hunt. Now, I was going to talk a lot about Kareem Hunt, but I'm going to keep this really, really short. For starters, guys, I've talked a lot about Kareem Hunt this offseason, and if you are one of our loyal subscribers watching tons of our videos, I apologize. That's why I'm going to keep this short. You know how much I've talked about him, and I have just poured all sorts of information out there. So I will say this. One, we do have to update you guys. Since I last made a video, I made a video on Nick Chubb versus Kareem Hunt. Just super in-depth breakdown. It was like 20 minutes on 2 players. So if you want that information, I'm not going to be sharing all that right now. Go check out that video if you haven't seen it. But to update you on a few things, honestly, guys, he just loses a lot of value. He just took an 8-game suspension. Not only is that 8 games he can't play, that's also probably 2 or 3 games he's going to have to earn his role once he's back. I mean, that is huge. Kareem Hunt went from being a guy who could be a sleeper, could have a huge season, to he just doesn't hold a lot of value now. He doesn't. Maybe in a year or two, maybe if things change, but at this current pace, no matter how talented he is, no matter how amazing he's been, there's just not a lot to like right now. And I know you got something to say. You're getting ready to say something.
Actually, I don't have a whole lot to say. The one thing about sometimes suspensions like this, guys will appeal it because they're going to get cut in half, could go from 8 to 4, but he's already come out publicly and said he's not going to appeal the suspension. So you can know beyond a shadow of doubt it's going to be 8 games. And for a fantasy, when you're only playing 13 in a regular season, that's a good portion of it. Plus, you got Nick Chubb in front of him, who Nick Chubb has been very good. You're right. I actually like Kareem Hunt. I think he's very talented. He's a guy that would be great to kind of throw on your bench and see what he does next season in 2020. So
yeah, well, think about this. It's a 13-week fantasy season. 8 he is suspended. 2 he earns his rollback. Then you have 3 weeks of fantasy playoffs. Are you going to put him in your roster if he's been suspended that whole time and is just now earning his spot back in the roster, and he's splitting carries with Nick Chubb, and they're splitting time with the insane amount of passing game guys like Njoku, Odell Beckham, and Jarvis Landry? Just there's not a lot of value there anymore. We have to talk about it because he's a big name, and people are still asking us questions about it. But unfortunately, it's just one of those situations that didn't quite work out to the fantasy potential that it could have.
So Adrian Peterson, he shocked everybody last year and he proved many people wrong, including myself. I really thought this guy's at the very end there. So after 3 seasons of decline, he rebounded with a 4.2 yards per carry, had a very nice year there, but that was even better. He had a very good year, especially when you consider the fact that that Redskins team was hammered with injuries. The offensive line lost so many guys. They lost 2 All-Pros. Alex Smith went down with a gruesome season-ending injury there. Ugly. I feel bad I broke my leg like that in a whole different way, but I feel his pain. They lost some wide receivers, and yet he still had a good year. He had 3 games where he had over 100 yards rushing, and an additional 4 games where he had 90-plus yards of rushing there. And his numbers would have been even better once again had that O-line not had so many injuries. Consider this. In his first 7 games, his yards per carry was 4.6. His next 9 games, his yards per carry was 3.7. And if you look at last year, he had a yards after contact of 3. That was very, very good numbers there. It goes all the way back to when he was in his prime. This guy was just crushing it. That's some very good numbers there. This guy's in great shape. He's a workout. He's a freak physically. Now you look at Frank Gore, right? Frank Gore last year proved that he could still produce even though he was older, and he was older than Adrian Peterson is now. And so I think he could come out. I think he can have a very good year there. He signed a 2-year deal with the Skins. Concerns I have is Darius Geis. This guy was making news in the preseason. He looked poised to have a breakout there before season was ended with an ACL injury there. Now, reports are his rehab's going well. I assume they're not going to rush him back. Why when they have Adrian Peterson? So why rush the guy back there? But at some point, he is going to come back, and when he does, that's going to hurt Adrian's value somewhat. And so for me, Adrian Peterson, a guy that you could throw on your bench. I'm not going to trust him as a running back too, although he could end up, if everything falls right for him and he gets the right breaks, he can end up being a running back too. Has a very solid year. But for me, his age, Darius Guy, some other factors there. And you look at Case Keenum, who I'm not a huge fan of. I'm probably going to view him more as a running back 3 and just play it safe and look elsewhere. But I do wish him the best. Obviously, being a prior Vikings, I hope he has a good year. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I got nothing to add to that. It's one of those situations where he plays good enough that it's so tempting to pick him up, and I want him to do well, but also I want to avoid that situation because he's old for a running back, and he's taken quite a few hits over the years. So there's not a whole lot to add to that. I do think it's interesting they signed him for $4 million a year for 2 years. It's like, hey, we have some faith in you, but really not that much. So I guess we'll see what it is. He's definitely one of those running backs who's going to go to a fantasy owner who doesn't have a great running back situation and maybe can be enough to fill in as a number 2 or a number 3 guy if you've, weak no options. There's always that fantasy team out there with great wideouts, good quarterback, good tight end, and just seriously needs running backs. And usually a guy, an older running back like a Peterson, that's usually a fantasy running back like where they normally end.
So now to our final guy.
Yeah, now to our last guy.
Glad that he landed somewhere where he's going to be the starting quarterback. At least it appears like he's going to be. I feel bad he doesn't have any weapons, but let's get right to him.
All right, let's talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick. Or I'm sorry, that's not his name anymore. Ryan Fitzmagic. It's nice to. It was so much fun watching him last year.
Magic is gone this year, but
yeah, it is. The funny thing was, you remember after they had that huge win, was it over the Saints or it was over a really good football team? And he showed up with the gold chain and the shirt that was
classic. I love it.
Just off, and he's out there, yeah, we're not going to let it get to our heads, and he's messing around, just, pretending to be super full of himself and having lots of fun. The funny thing, if you look up Ryan Fitzpatrick on NFL.com, that's the picture they have of him, is in that outfit with the gold chain and everything. So I don't know why I just noticed that today. But anyways, man, he is a good, mature veteran quarterback. It takes a mature veteran quarterback to have a completion percentage like him under pressure. Under pressure, he completes 48.3% of his passes. It doesn't sound amazing, but it's actually better than a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL. He had a monster season last year, 8.3 yards per attempt. That's crazy. I mean, that is super surprising, and I just have to stop and apologize. Poor guy is going to a really bad offense.
Yeah.
So he plays last year for the Bucs, who we always know of a really good supporting cast for him, good wideouts, good line, got a lot of good options. Now going to Miami, that's terrible. I actually found an interesting article. NFL.com ranked quarterbacks or ranked teams by their supporting cast for a quarterback. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers ranked as the 8th best supporting cast for a quarterback. He's now going to Miami, who ranks in the bottom 5. This is just awful switch. Honestly, guys, I don't think he's going to have a great season. But there are a few things that benefit him. One, the whole team is a mess. And when the whole team sucks, sometimes you just let the quarterback throw the ball up and you let him see what can happen. And that fits Ryan Fitzpatrick. In fact, he loves to throw the ball deep. Last year, 51.5% of his passes were deep passes. That's over 20 yards or more. Half of his throws were over 20 yards. I don't know how he managed to do that, how the coaches didn't take him out. If I were a coach, I would be horrified by that amount of deep throws that he was making. But you know what? For a team like Miami that's going to be playing from behind, doesn't have an amazing running game, that could work out. It really could work out, at least from a minor perspective, where he might be a guy that you can plug and play from week to week. I'm happy he's found a roster. I'm happy he's going to be what looks like the starting quarterback for this season, but I do feel bad for him because, quite honestly, it's not the sort of situation you want to be in as a quarterback. Probably not the way you want to end your career, so hopefully he'll get another shot on another team before he retires.
All right. Nothing to say about that. I think this is the end of the video. You want to conclude it?
Yeah, no, there's not much else to say, guys. We didn't say it a lot throughout the video, but on any player at all, any one of these guys, just let us know what you think. Let us know if you think we're wrong. If you have any interesting statistics to let us know. You know what? There's nothing more than I love than that. Last offseason, someone shared us some cool information on Doug Baldwin, and I actually hadn't seen any of that. I didn't know that, and so it was really cool to have somebody say, hey, here's something that I've noticed. If you guys want to interact with us, let us know. We love your questions. We love when you guys want to know our opinion, but we want to hear your opinion as well. So make sure to let us know. Make sure to let Rob know how wrong he is. I do every day. And unless you have anything to say, we could probably sign off.
Yes. Well, we'll see this year when you can finally win a championship.
All right.